Welcome to everyone who just joined. Please do leave your names and let us know where you're calling from. Love to say hello. We'll get started in just a few minutes. Hey, thank you again for joining us, Amy. Again, glad that you could make it, especially given all the infrastructure challenges. I hope things are starting to look up for you guys. We are also joined by several OCP staff members as well, and our terrific partner Sasha's joining us too. Woohoo! Welcome from TI Armenia. Hi.
Hello. Hello.
It's great to have you. We have great to talk with you again. Good to have you with Des Moines. Wonderful. Ooh, code for Albania. Awesome. All right, please do take a moment to introduce yourselves on the chat. We'd love to know who we have with us. My name is Kay Sklar, and I am the LIFT Program Manager. I know that it's very late for you in the Philippines, so a special shout out to you. There will be a recording of this webinar, so if you happen to fall asleep midway through, I believe it's the middle of your night, there will be a recording and I will share it with you, so no pressure either. Great to have all of you with us. So I know that people will slowly trickle in. So while they do, I'll just quickly run through the objectives of our call today and we will get started. And again, please do leave your name and let us know where you're calling from. A huge welcome to all of you who have joined. So our objectives today are to help you learn how to deepen your understanding of a complex challenge and shape your project around that understanding. We'll also share with you some ideas for crafting strong problem and solution statements for project plans. This works for project plans like LIFT as well as in general. I think there's some good tips and tricks that we're excited to share with you on creating those strong problem and solution statements. Of course, throughout, you'll get an idea of what we're looking for in LIFT applications, and we are also very glad to answer your questions. So you should feel free to drop any questions as you have them in the chat. My colleague Catherine will help answer, and I'm also just glad to pause and hear from you about any of your questions. So no need to hold on to them. That said, if you do want to sit on your questions for a bit, we will have time for Q&A at the end of this call after we've discussed LIFT, looking at understanding your challenge, and again, crafting problem and solution statements. So before we dive in, I'd love to get a sense of what challenges you're thinking about working on through LIFT. So if you could take a moment to write down your challenge and put it in the chat, or you don't have to have a firm opinion yet, we're not going to hold you to it, but I'd love to get a sense of what type of challenges you're thinking about working on through this program. So if you could take a moment, write in the chat, like to share, get some ideas about what others on the call are thinking about working on, please take a moment to write, and I'll give you a few moments to think. And as Catherine said in the chat, we're also just excited to hear about the challenges that you're facing generally. So even if it's not for LIFT, it could be for your work more generally. Let us know. I know that many of you are thinking about working on issues relating to infrastructure. There's some green procurement projects that I've heard about happening. Great to see about scaling solutions. I'd love to know about what the solution is. I think that we are definitely interested in supporting those types of solutions that have scalability. Yes, oh my goodness, demystifying the procurement process with the city to increase the vendor pool and incorporating sustainability and social equity values. Thank you, Pab. I think that resonates with a lot of people on this call, no matter where they're calling from. And yeah, For sure, building that more open, inclusive procurement process for minority women and veteran-owned firms. That's awesome. Um, Access to public services, terrific. Um, Definitely great to see. All right, so please do keep your thoughts coming, and we'd love to hear from you. So the great news, based on all of the ideas that you've shared with me so far, is you are all in the right place. Open Contracting Lift is our program to help teams of procurement reformers and innovators around the world make progress on their projects. It's an 18-month-long program, and will help you with 200 hours of technical assistance and $30,000 of support over the course of the program. One thing that I would like to note, though, is that Lyft is just one of the ways you provide support to our partners. So please do let us know what you're working on. Either just reach out or apply, and we'll be in touch with you regardless. We are very eager to work with folks around the world in different ways. So please do reach out and know that this is not the only opportunity to work with us. So if you would like to work with us through Lyft this year, our challenge question is pretty special. It's how will you use open contracting to support an inclusive and effective recovery? So open contracting principles and practices include things like moving from paper-based to digital procurement systems. It's about identifying user needs during planning, designing more inclusive RFPs that are clear and accessible, can be engaging residents throughout the procurement process, as well as tracking performance and enabling feedback loops during delivery of those services. In sum, it's all of those principles and processes that support a really effective public service delivery and access to economic opportunity through open data and stakeholder engagement. So it's all of those things together, and it's about disclosing that information and making it accessible and supporting collaboration to problem solve together. Lyft in particular is our program that's for special challenges. These are challenges that are complex and require multi-stakeholder engagement to solve. Lyft is for problems that result in lower quality public goods, works, and services, or less economic opportunity. And it's also for problems that disproportionately impact marginalized communities. What do we mean by complex problems? Well, complex problems are those that require change across multiple dimensions to really achieve impact. These are challenges that require changes in terms of people's minds, the policies, the data, the politics, and often these challenges are ones that require you to work across departments or across sectors to achieve the impact that you're trying to see. Together, these are the features that we're looking for in a really juicy challenge. And the good news is that through Lyft, we'll help you create those change and support change on all of these dimensions. I want to give you some examples of teams or challenges that we've worked on through Lyft. Hopefully this will illustrate how teams are using open contracting to address some of these very challenging issues. For example, in Buenos Aires, they are working on SME participation, and they have a vision for a more open procurement process and enabling SMEs to more easily compete, win, and deliver government contracts. To really get them there, the team has been undertaking multiple work streams, but two great examples that they've achieved great progress on are building buy-in and data analysis. So when the team began their work on this project, it was really just the open data team, and they had to build buy-in, and now they have a very strong cross-departmental coalition that is able to work together and communicate well and move their project forward. Thanks to some data analysis that the team is able to do, they also have a very strong understanding of how the government is currently spending its money with these small businesses and identify areas of opportunity. We're also working with Lyft, with Mexico City through Lyft right now on a huge bike share procurement. They have one of the most successful bike share programs in Latin America, but they still want to get more bicycles into more neighborhoods so that way more people can access this great form of transportation. And one thing that Mexico City has been doing very well is vendor engagement. They've been working with them in new ways, for example, conducting the city's first RFI and sharing information more openly through creating a special microsite and using this as a platform to share information like vendor Q&As. Not through Lyft, but a Lyft-like challenge was a project we worked on with the city of Philadelphia and increasing the quality of meals provided by the city through different programs. And the city knew that they had some challenges, that the meals weren't always up to the standard that they'd like them to be. So they conducted stakeholder engagement with the people that interact directly with this food process, including the people who are eating the food, the people preparing the food in the kitchens and the different vendors. And they identified some pain points in the procurement process so that way they could improve how they were buying food and provide higher quality food to residents at a reasonable cost to the city. One outcome of this was the city's first food RFP that used best value rather than lower cost. So I've talked with you about the Lyft program and given you some ideas of types of challenges we're looking at through Lyft. I'm going to pause and find out if there's any questions from folks before I continue on. Feel free to unmute yourself or leave a question in the chat. All right. Gonna give folks one more moment. Okay. Oh, hi, Frey. Please.
Hello. I've seen that the example that you mentioned in Brazil, it's actually very similar to our application. So, is it still all right for us to submit an application that's similar to what you're already doing or what your partners are already doing?
For sure, for sure. We are definitely interested in receiving applications like these. We know that just because it's happened somewhere one time doesn't mean that it's easy to replicate it, right? Because we know that each context is special, right? Just because one city was able to build buy-in, it's a whole another set of people and a whole different set of processes that you have to deal with in your context. And we know that it takes a lot of work, and we're here to support you on that. So if your application does have something to do, for example, with school meals, like we'd love to get that. If it's about SMEs or increasing vendor diversity more generally, please, those are all great issues that we would love to get applications on.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep. So you're all still in the right place.
Can I ask a question? Am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hi, this is Preeti. So I was wondering the degree of buy-in, especially from governments, that is like already necessary to be able to apply for this. What is expected?
That's a great question. And I think this is something that, CSOs or nonprofits are thinking about, but this is also a great question even if you're in government, right? How much buy-in do you need from people inside of your organization to make progress? We are looking for some buy-in for sure. Lyft will help you build even more buy-in, but there should be some high-level person who's saying like, yes, we want to work on this. And make progress on this. That's something that we'll be looking for in the applications. Recognizing that is hard to get, but we know that in order to achieve quick progress, and Lyft is 18 months, but still that's a pretty fast time frame. Yeah. There needs to be some high level buy-in to help push things forward and make progress. But once you have that basic level of, I say basic, once you have that level of buy-in, we'll help you get even more. But there should be someone who's holding that door open, or someone who will help cheerlead for you and make progress.
No,
so
that makes sense.
We are looking for some. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. And Catherine is sharing some helpful information on selection criteria as well in the chat. Other questions before I move on? All right. So diving into understanding your challenge, we're looking for projects that are ambitious and feasible, and of course will result in measurable impact by the end of the program. I know that many of you might feel like you already have a solid understanding of your challenge, and I'm sure you do, but getting really deep into exactly which piece of the challenge you want to address is very important because it underlies all of the rest of the work we do through LIFT. Having that good understanding of your challenge will also help you build that buy-in throughout the rest of your city or government or organization. It will help you create a solution that fits and help you achieve impact that you want to see. So that's why I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about how to go deep on your challenge and pick the right size challenge for you. So as you're thinking about your challenge, I would invite you to ask yourself these questions. So think about, what is your vision? Not just what is your challenge, but what is that perfect world that you're aiming for? Or not perfect, better world that you're aiming for. And another great question is, what is the root cause of your challenge? Also, who is involved and who is impacted by my challenge? And what are my constraints? If you ask these questions to yourself, you will get a deeper understanding and help create a scope of a challenge that will set you up well to create realistic plans and prioritize what you need to get done. As you're thinking about your challenge, I would also invite you to think about if it's the right size for you. It's possible that you might be thinking about challenges that are too big. And I'm not saying that your challenge is not too big. Many of us are dealing with very thorny challenges, like changing how procurement is done is very broad, right? And that's where a lot of us are aiming. But for the purposes of LIFT, I would invite you to think about picking a piece of that challenge to work on. So as you're scoping this, as you're writing your application, think what challenge can I take on? And is it feasible? Is it ambitious given the program timeframe of 18 months? Does my team have capacity to do it and the budget to do it? If you hit all of those marks, then your challenge size is just right. It might be too big though, if it's just frankly not feasible to achieve that within the program timeframe or given your capacity or your budget. And it might be too small, like if you're thinking about making changes that are too small that it won't address some of those root causes, then try to go a bit bigger. This is something that we care a lot about as we look at applications. So I would invite you to think really hard about making sure that you pick the right size challenge and that you're realistic. I know that when it comes down to the time of doing interviews with folks, we will ask you some really hard questions about if you can really deliver or if you've thought big enough. I know that it's hard to get right, but do spend some time making sure that you feel like you have the right size challenge for your context. It's also worth thinking about or accepting the idea that your understanding of your challenge will change as you consider it and as you ask some of those questions about your vision, and in particular, as you think about the root cause of some of your challenges. Here's an example that one of our partners, Sasha, who is on our call, shared with me how a city came to him and they were worried about very high levels of traffic fatalities. And this had been going on for a very long time. They finally had this budget to buy new technology infrastructure, and they thought that their challenge really was that they had this old technology infrastructure. However, when the team sat down to really think and go deeper and considering their challenge, they realized that they weren't actually so sure about how these accidents were happening or why these accidents were happening. So they refined their challenge statement to be that our city has struggled with high levels of traffic fatalities for decades because of our lack of data and analytical capabilities And because of our lack of data and analytics capabilities, we're not able to make targeted investments to reduce accidents. So this is a great example of how asking yourselves these tough questions can help you create a really strong understanding of your challenge. I also think this is a great preview for why it's important to think about your challenge before you think about your solution, because clearly you'll come up with different solutions based on your understanding of your challenge, right? If your understanding of your challenge is like the first example at the top, because you blame it on the technology infrastructure, then your solution will be very different than if you're looking at the lack of data and analytic capabilities. So I encourage you just to be open and ask yourselves these questions. It's definitely an interesting process. So I'd also like to invite you to take a moment to think about what is the root cause of the challenge you're considering. I would invite you to write it in the chat if you feel like, but regardless, I'll just give us all a moment to think hard about some of the root causes, the underlying challenges underneath your challenge. So, and you can feel free to share in the chat as well. All right. So hopefully you've done some good thinking, but what are those, yes, as Catherine put it, the underlying causes that you might be struggling with? And this really does take time to think about. So I invite you to spend that time, spend a few moments doing that good thinking. And again, yeah, it could be lacking technology tools, or maybe it's it's always fun to think hard about these questions. I know that there's this design thinking exercise called, I think it's called the 5 whys, 7 whys, some number of whys. But if you keep going, it's this idea that if you keep going and say like, okay, why is there a lack of technology tools? Whys, and then if you keep going, it's worthwhile to be considering. And great. Okay, so corruption, yes, there's a lot there. So Amy also has a great point of how can we get to the root cause. I do like the 5 whys. I think that there are some other tools that I'm going, and links to different resources that I'm going to share at the end of the presentation in terms of frameworks to help think hard with your team about this. So I do have some handy dandy tools that I will be sharing with you. I like the 5 whys. I don't link out to it, but I find it to be helpful and interesting. Yeah, we have a great challenge wheel that you might find useful with your team. So now I'm going to move on to the crafting of strong statements. And making good problem and solution statements are helpful for Lyft, but they're also helpful for creating strong project plans in general. 2 key tips, biggest takeaways. Start with your problem first and be specific, actionable, and precise. Sasha again gave me this great quote as we were talking about this presentation and ideas that we wanted to leave you with. And that's, Einstein said something like, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. I hope that you take that away as well. And if you have an hour to work on your application, please spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. I think that's great advice. So looking in particular about the problem statements, a good problem statement defines the gap between your current situation and the future you want to see. So a so-so problem statement, or a not very strong problem statement, would be, our public school program needs reform. This leads to a lot of questions. Try to be more specific, actionable, and precise. So better problem statement, or a really strong problem statement, would be, in our city, 800,000 children rely on our school meal program to get their main meal of the day, but almost 20% of the food contracts are correctly awarded, and many of the contracts receive only one bid. So our children are getting lower quality meals at a high cost for the government. This is very precise, very specific, very actionable. And you can see how by thinking hard about this problem and creating a really strong problem statement, it would set a team like this up well for a solution, right? We know that there's this problem with direct awards and not many contracts receiving bids. So our minds would then go to like, how do you increase that vendor diversity and creating solutions around that? Whereas our public school meal program needs reform, a weak problem statement like that doesn't set you up as well for creating your solution. Here are some additional examples of strong problem statements. Not so great is our city does not spend money well on transportation projects. Better statement would be something like a certain number of our low-income residents use public transportation network to get to work each day, but our bus network is unreliable. Some percentage of our buses are late or never arrive at all, and we don't have very much money to increase funds. So to increase the number of buses. And so our community suffers from longer commute times because of that. So thinking about what's specific, actionable, and precise. When it comes to solution statements, these will flow from the problem statements. So again, spend 55 minutes thinking about your problem, 5 minutes thinking about your solution, if you're going to work with your team on this. So some examples of solution statements would be, we'll use open contracting to monitor the money spent on transportation projects. This is not so specific, actionable, or precise. Better would be to get really more detailed in thinking about how you're going to solve it. Maybe you're going to be using new vendor engagement strategies to increase the number of bidders and integrate community feedback throughout the contracting process and improve monitoring of contracts during delivery. It's possible you could get even more specific than this, but trying to wrap your hands around that that solution that you're aiming for and be specific, actionable, and precise. As I mentioned earlier, we do have some resources that I will be glad to share with you at the end of this call, or I'll email them out to everyone at the end of this call. One of them is a reform design and management toolkit with links to several worksheets that you can complete with your teams. And we also have a lovely blog post that provides a similar overview of things that we're looking for in applications. I also want to invite all of you to reach out if you have any questions or would like to get some feedback on your project ideas. We've also created a special worksheet that you might find useful as you're working with your team on creating your application. And this is a challenge statement worksheet. I would invite you to start with the root cause and thinking about what are the underlying causes. Most likely there'll be more than one, right? Thinking about the symptoms of how your challenges are manifested in the lives of the people that face this challenge. And thinking about how you'll know that you've been successful. What will have changed? From there, you can move on to the challenge summary and write your challenge statement. I'd like to note that this is a guide. I'm sure that if you work on this with your team, you're going to be bouncing around and you'll copy and paste, and something that you think is a symptom might actually be root cause, or vice versa. So you should feel free to use this as a tool to promote conversation in your group and work on together to refine your challenge. I will send a link around shortly with a copy of this, so you can feel free to copy it and use it. This would also be a great tool to have a conversation with us. I would be glad to talk with you. I know Sasha would be glad to talk with you as well, for those of you in the US or some of you abroad. And if you complete this worksheet, we'd be glad to help give input. And this could be a great way to get ideas from us and share ideas with us. So please do use this worksheet. I've also included instructions. So if you forgot everything I just said, don't worry, there's instructions that go along with this worksheet as well. So as promised, I have left a good chunk of time for Q&A. I'd love to hear if you have any questions about the content we've discussed today, but I'd also be very glad to talk through some additional examples or and also hear some ideas that you might be thinking about working on through Lift. You should feel free to unmute yourself or write questions in the chat. While you are thinking about some of your juicy challenges, I'm curious if it resonates with you that your understanding of a challenge will change as you work on it with your team. Either if any of you on the call or if any of my colleagues from OCP or Sasha have any other stories they'd like to share of how your understanding of a challenge has shifted and how that informed the solution, I would love to hear from you.
I think I can chime in quickly. This is Carrie Klutz. I'm head of country programs from OCP, and I've been lucky to use some of the resources that Catherine has shared in the chat with some of our country partners in Kenya and Uganda and elsewhere. And I think one thing that's really interesting is, as Kay was explaining and one of the questions touched on earlier, sort of digging beyond that first level challenge or problem statement to get at the what is behind that and what is the real root cause of the problem. It sounds maybe it sounds obvious, but it's sometimes a challenging conversation to have even with a small team, but it's really, really fruitful. So definitely recommend that. Sorry, I think someone else is trying to come in. Go for it.
Sasha, I see that you left a great tip for us. Would you like to explain it over a call if your audio is working?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, so we've done a lot of these processes with governments and other stakeholders about problem framing, and don't get too frustrated when most people in the room will give you a ton of solutions rather than problem statements, even if you ask them in advance. So what we typically did was to get people a little task before the meeting to just write down the problem as they see it. You'll get a long list of solutions most commonly, but you can then start the meeting by just reminding everyone that you're looking for problems and root causes. And what I found helpful is to just get everyone maybe in a little icebreaker to unlearn their expectations. Most people are deeply invested in certain solutions to problems. So just letting go, just reminding them that this is kind of about not talking about their favorite outcome. And also to visualize someone outside the organization, maybe a citizen, maybe a child in a school or otherwise, who could really benefit if we solve this problem. What would actually happen? And I think those two things together really kind of move people's mind away from the table and the kind of little battles they might want to play and into actually what we're doing here together.
Great, thank you, Sasha. That's a great tip. I know that, yeah, we've worked with a lot of teams, so you know that this is really hard. It's one thing to present it and say, like, go forth, do this worksheet, but it's really hard. And we've seen with some of our teams that people just might think that they're talking about the same challenge or the same solution, but when they go in deep and go down farther, they realize that they're thinking about very different challenges. So it can just be a helpful exercise to get everyone on the same page. It's real work. Ooh.
Okay, I will answer that. That's a kind of very good question. You caught me off step. I think it's what we've done is simply to ask people to take a breath, to not approach this with a solution in mind. If they have an idea on how this problem could be solved, to just put that aside for a moment, almost like a little meditation exercise. Put that aside, and then start to think about who could benefit. So I think the icebreaker can be a combination of those two, and maybe as a group you then talk about. So I wouldn't so much talk about what people unlearned, but maybe talk about as a group who in the public, who in the city could benefit, just that we're kind of having some specific characters in mind. And I think there's a great quote from, I know from the Chicago school system, where someone said, well, as soon as we talk about Henry James, a 7-year-old elementary schooler, everyone in the room agrees. No one talks about politics, no one talks about funding, budget, or anything. Everyone agrees that this child needs our support and how we can best solve it. And I think that's just a kind of very human dynamic you kind of somehow magically need to unlock.
Yeah, I think that's a very good idea of focusing on that particular stakeholder. I found it to be helpful to also take turns and go around as you're completing an exercise, like the challenge wheel that we're going to share with you, or the worksheet at the end. If you have everyone go around a circle, if you're in person, or could be over as Zoom call as well, and keep brainstorming and dumping until you've run out of things, just to force people to get a bit out of their heads on things, and to just feel free to create that safe space to get people thinking about things they might not have, or to force them a bit on that. I do definitely enjoy working more in person with people on this, but certainly you could do that on a Zoom call as well, by having that round robin, and also providing time for people to think about it in advance too, and do some of their own wild brainstorming. There's some really good prompts that exist about this too, and I'm happy to share some of those other great icebreaker type resources as well. I'll add those to the presentation before I send it out. All right, other comments or ideas? I see there's some other conversation in the chat. Interesting. So Preeti asks if there is any merit in having someone with lived experience during these sessions. That's a good question. I mean, I'm curious what others on the call would think. I would say it could be helpful at the beginning, and then to let them go, to share at the beginning to inspire folks. But I think yes, I feel very strongly that it's so important to have those stakeholders in the room when you're creating solutions. So I applaud you. But it is, if you want to think with me, or I know that you're in contact with Ben about how and when to bring them in, because I want to be respectful of their time as well. I'd be glad to talk with you about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think maybe I'll go back and take it to our team and see how they are placed for this as well. Something like this. And when I talk about lived experience, I'm not just talking about vendors, as opposed to individuals in areas that are, say, hard to get to and have difficulty getting to, say, public health facilities or anything like that. It's all kinds of lived experiences, but yeah.
Yeah. I am a huge fan of it. I think perhaps why I was sounding rather hesitant earlier is because Sasha put the nail on the head, where sometimes it can change the dynamic in the room and be challenging. So it's worth thinking about how to introduce that and do that well. We also have some resources as well, and thinking about how to do those user journeys, and it can be so helpful to learn from. So I would recommend that everyone think about that and consider how they could integrate those opinions and those ideas into their work.
Yeah, and I think it might be easier if you were face-to-face as opposed to over a Zoom call or something like that as well.
Yeah, it's certainly not ideal, but it can still be done. And I think it's just about asking it can be helpful to prepare some good questions and have a framework before you get going on that. I'm a huge fan of user research, actually. I have some background in that, so I'm always glad to talk more with folks about doing that side of things as well.
Great, thank you.
Can I just chime in for 1 second? I think those engagements can be very simple. Just today, I spoke to the chief executive of the city of Sydney, and she has a new head of procurement starting. And she said, I'm going to take that woman for a walk through the city to see all the great projects the procurement team has procured in the past, and that we start our relationship on the ground. And so I think imagining kind of simple ways to kind of get people out of the room, out of the process, and kind of break that up. I think those are some very simple ideas, where you hold the meeting. You could hold it outside in a park or in a schoolyard or something that kind of already begins to shift the conversation without necessarily engaging the complexity of bringing people into the room if that is not possible in the time you have.
Great, thank you. Other questions or ideas? I feel like we've had such good questions already, so I'm curious what other ideas or questions you have. Well, feel free to put them in the chat. Last chance here. As we wrap up, I would hope that you take away that we are here to support you. So if you have questions about any of this, please do reach out. I would also encourage you to complete the different worksheets, be it the one that I will be sending you as part of this presentation with your team, or one of the other worksheets that I'll be sharing with you. And feel free to get in touch with us, and we'd be glad to look at them with you, to use it as a tool to think more deeply about the challenge and your solution. With these types of worksheets and exercises, there's no right or wrong answer. So don't feel like you have to have it completed or perfect. Think about it as a way to start a good conversation, both with your team and then with us. So if all you have is just a few notes down, that is more than enough. Feel free to reach out. We'd be glad to talk with you about it and use it as a tool to help us deepen our own thinking about how we can help you. Please do reach out. We really are happy to brainstorm with you. I will be sharing this presentation with all of you afterwards, including adding in some additional links for icebreakers, and there's some great stuff out there. So I'm glad to drop that in as well as a tool and resource. And a very warm thank you all for attending. Please do reach out, and I look forward to talking with you more. All right. Have a good rest of your days, everyone. Thank you all for joining us, be it early or late your time. We do appreciate it, and have a wonderful rest of your day and week.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.